All right. Second here, adjust things a little bit. All right. So, I had a lot on my plate as I went into sabbatical, and the question was, what do I do? And I had so many plates spinning, so many projects, and I kind of felt like somebody who has a lot of clutter in their house, and almost all the if you ever watched any of these shows. Even hoarder shows, I mean, everything is near and dear, and everything is personal, right? And so, getting that's why it's there. All that stuff has some kind of importance to it. And so, if you know, sometimes decluttering is really hard. I am the person in the family that tends to throw things away. So, but anyway, so I had to do some academic decluttering. I had to decide some of these projects that have been dangling out on my list for a while. What was I going to do with them? And well, unfortunately, there's a lot of them that still spark a lot of joy. So, so I have some research in mass shootings database papers that I've been working on, and I have some papers on student counseling, counseling students as they prepare in their master's program and looking at that. I'm very involved in some AI projects. I wanted to write a stats devotional book. And I even have another devotional book untitled on the law, what I call the laws of the wheel for counselors that I wanted to write. So, pretty ambitious list of things to do in one semester, but I dove in, and so I was able to publish one research paper, which is I will upload this for you if you'd like to read it. It's a very complex paper. It's one of the more statistically complex papers I've ever written. And it was quite a challenge, but it was a lot of fun too. And so we looked at there was a database by the FBI that for a long time was just held by the FBI, and they finally made it public a few years ago. Well, they kind of made it public. They invited a few people in, and I was one of the people on the ground floor of that. I'm not sure if I've told you all my story, but I was a first responder to a mass shooting event. And actually, my partner, Dr. Holland, who's on this paper, Julie Holland, and we sat with the families and gave them the news as their loved ones were unfortunately killed, and that was quite a journey, quite a process for us. And so Danny and I have been involved um, I'm trying to understand mass shooting events and for ever since then. So it's been kind of an important journey in my life. So I've done a lot of work around that. This is a paper that came, you might recognize some of these names are student names on here. And so this is a paper that came out of this class 2 years ago. So Peter Buckingham, Karen Fisher, Meredith McDaniels, and Reese Wilson, along with Dr. Stafford and myself, we looked at trying to understand the difference between adjunct and core faculty in how they evaluate the master's students. And we found some differences, and they were differences that had never been reported. And so we reported those and we're able to get that published. And then I think this is a fun one. This is Michelle Holloman, who was our first PhD graduate, and this is her dissertation. And we were able to finally get this one over the hump this summer and get it into press, I think around October. Yes, October, it finally came out. So a lot of elbow grease on all three of these papers. And our doc students are publishing their dissertations, which is always a good thing. Those are three papers, and I have three more that are out for review right now. Another one on understanding school shooters, understanding school shooting events specifically, and I'm looking to profile if there are profile similarities in school shooters, and found some. What are the implications for schools? Also looking at another paper from the mass shooting database, and we've added some variables. And this is an interesting paper. We actually found a spike in mass shooting events that's always happens about 5 years after an economic downturn. And so our thinking is that when there's a recession, and by economic downturn, I mean a recession, And the recession is usually defined as at least two quarters of a certain drop in a lot of variables in the economy, like employment. But we found that our thinking is that when there's an economic downturn, it hits people, they lose their jobs, they lose their income. It creates all kinds of turmoil in families and in systems and for individuals. But after an economic downturn passes, the majority of people are able to eventually get back on the tracks and keep going down the path, as it were. But there's probably a subset, a small group of people that really struggle to ever regain their balance after significant social presses like an economic downturn, and that these things play out by not immediately, but in a lagged kind of capacity. And so we demonstrated that there's almost, if we look at over 35 years of data looking at mass shootings, there's almost always a spike that happens approximately 5 years after an economic downturn. So kind of interesting. Uh, and then the last one that we're working on right now is another paper that came out of with the doc students. So we're working on another paper looking at the CCSR, which is an instrument that we use to evaluate counselor competencies in our master's students. So these papers are all out for review. We'll see if we can get them across the finish line. But that wasn't my big project. My big project was I decided to write a devotional book on statistics because there was none. and, I, and how can there be all these faith-based training programs all over the United States in counseling and social work and psychology, and they're all students have to take a basic stats and research class, and there's no book in the Christian community trying to like talk about like how these concepts might relate to our Christian walk. And so I wrote 17 fairly brief chapters. I think the whole book's about 103 pages long. And um, though I don't have it required for this course, you might as well pick it up because I'll probably reference it anyway, and you're going to have it for my stats class. So just bad news. The good news is it's dirt cheap. You can get it for $9.99 as an ebook on Amazon, or you can get the paperback for $14.99. So I've kept it priced at a decent place. So that's what I've been up to. And let me give you a little bit of just a little bit of an insight into it. So here's a chapter, and you're going to bump into this construct even in this class, if not this 7 weeks, the next 7 weeks. It's a mathematical concept called factor analysis. You're all familiar with it. If you've had any kind of instruments, you like the Beck depression inventory, which I think I have a few slides on here. The Beck depression inventory uses a factor analysis to validate it as an empirically sound instrument. And so basically, a factor analysis is just a statistical method used to uncover hidden dimensions within complex data. So let's maybe just think about the DSM for a minute. So if we were to give somebody a diagnosis of ADHD, we'd all could open our DSM up and we could look at the criteria, right? And there's all this criteria that we would sift through. If somebody hits enough of these different things like a hyperactivity or impulse control, distractibility, all these different categories, we would say uh, all these attributes, all these indicators create a factor, and the factor is this person has ADHD. So a lot of times, factor analysis is a statistical approach that helps us summarize a lot of data and in kind of a new construct, and we call that new construct a factor. So let's maybe think about this in relationship to depression. So we could say sadness, hopelessness, fatigue, worthlessness, sleep disturbance, concentration difficulties. These are all attributes that we could look and we could empirically test and say, do these things kind of hold together and measure a factor or a construct that we call depression? And of course, that was the work of Aaron Beck. And if you know anything about the Beck Depression Inventory, you know that there are 21 items, and that all 21 items, there are 7 items for each of these. So 7 items are looking at depression and trying to measure it from more of an affective level. Some of the seven items are looking at more like cognitive processes, And the 7 items are looking at somatic or physical. And we all know that if we've worked with individuals with depression or we've experienced depression ourselves, we all know that that depression it hits all of these, right? Maybe you have a more, maybe some clients have more of a disposition to show it affectively or somatically, while others may show it, but they all have a little bit of each of these. And so the Beck Depression Inventory then is, here's just a few items, a sampler from each. So I don't feel sad, my appetite, I have difficulty concentrating. So you can see affect, some somatization, and cognitive distortions, cognitive challenges. This is a factor analysis when we throw it in the statistical washing machine. And this is just, again, you don't have to understand this drawing, but this is just basically to say that, in fact, we can take all 21 items of the Beck instrument and we can statistically test them to see if we can get this factor analysis, and we can verify that these 7 items pretty much cluster around each of these constructs, and that these 3 constructs add up and give us a depression score. So where might we see a factor analysis in the Bible? Well, I think there is one. So this is my devotion for tonight. In Matthew 5:17, Jesus says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill them. And later, the Jewish religious leaders, likely puzzling over this, they asked Jesus a question. They wanted to know what was the greatest of the commandments. And if you've ever read anything around these religious leaders coming and asking them that, it was probably a setup question. It was a trap question. So if Jesus would have said one commandment, they would have said, well, what about that one? They would have said, well, see, it was a trap question, right? And yet we know how Jesus responded to it, right? He responded, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and foremost commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And then he says, one of the most outstanding statements, on these 2 commandments depends some of the law. No, all of the law and the prophets hold together. And so Jesus is doing a factor analysis. He's saying all of the law can be summarized in love God and love others. Well, let's see if we look at the 10 Commandments just and see how if that actually holds true. And so remember the Sabbath. Don't misuse the name of the Lord. Don't have other idols for yourself, uh, and have no other gods before me. Well, that pretty much seems like loving God to me. Now let's see if the other 6 hold together on loving others. Well, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't murder, don't bear false testimony, honor your father and mother, don't covet your neighbor's stuff. That feels like you're loving your neighbor and yourself. And so my devotion then focuses around that fact that Jesus does a factor analysis in the Bible, and we can see an example of that. So how might we make sense out of this? And so this is just a little bit from the book here. And so through the divine analysis, Jesus revealed the structure of God's moral design, love for God and love for others. All other rules, traditions, and moral details are expressions of these 2 essential dimensions. And so factor analysis reminds us that there's a deeper structure of faith in relationship, and that faith is made alive in Christ, and it bears fruit in love of God and neighbors. And so there were some questions I would ask you. And so when life feels complex, what deeper factors might be shaping what I see on the surface? What would it be like for you to develop a 10-item questionnaire to measure a trait, for example, extroversion? So those of you that are familiar with the NEO know that that's one of the scales, or one of the personality traits on the NEO. And so the NEO is built on a factor analysis, for sure. All the items on there cluster around the different personality factors. How might love for God and love for your neighbor serve as factors that organize your own spiritual and professional life? And how could you recognize structure beneath complexity? And how could that deepen your compassion and clarity in practice? So I wrote about 17 or 18 chapters on different statistical concepts, and that's kind of just a quick flyover of my factor analysis chapter. I'm still got some other projects I got going here, and one of and ours is on here. So somewhere along the line, somebody called me and wanted to know if I could help them on a research project looking at MMPI profiles of men and women on the missionary field, and so I'm in the middle of that, and we have some data that's already been accepted for a research presentation. I can't remember where, but so and then there's our project. So this is it. This is what we're going to do. I'm pitching it to you right now. We are going to look at the efficacy of EMDR in treating trauma. Yeah, it doesn't sound like too hard of a project, does it? Yeah, it's kind of like that should be have that wrapped up probably by the third week of the class, right? So that's our project, and I'm going to be honest with you. We're delving into some new areas of research that I've read about and tinkered with a little bit, but we're going to jump in all this together. We are going to use what's called the Bradford Hill criteria. This is a criteria that comes out of the field, out of epidemiology, and it assesses when we can observe associations in a plausible way. We're also going to use something called modern causal inferences, which I have a lot more experience with than the Bradford Hill criteria. So we're basically going to, instead of conducting new research, we're going to use these two criteria, these Bradford Hill criteria and the modern causal inference evaluation process, and we're going to review all the seminal literature in that we think that is important to answer our question about efficacy of EMDR in treating trauma. Now, obviously, there's a lot of there's a lot we have to do on that, and that is just a general umbrella. So, what do we mean when we even that title? That title's we're gonna drill down on that. There's going to be a lot of operationalizing of terms to help us focus and do this. And the idea it's different than a meta-analysis. Some of you may be familiar or heard of a meta-analysis. This is maybe it might sound like a meta-analysis, but it's actually very different. And one of the things we're going to do with this is if we do a good job, we'll identify we'll be able to say, here are the strengths of EMDR, and here's what's been empirically tested about EMDR, and here's what's not been tested, and here's the gaps, and here's the holes. And so the contribution that a paper like this could really make is to say, here's where we're at when we look at all the prior existing literature on EMDR and treating trauma, and here's what we have to do to really shore this up to be able to say this is empirically supported treatment. It really is a wonderful contribution. And these kind of papers are being called for all the time by professional journals. And so I think this is a layup to get this published. That's my hope anyway. Now, we started off this class this week with some pretty big tasks. You've been tasked with going through the city training. I think Kaylee, you've completed it, right? Yeah. Kaylee had nobody confirmed her clients and they all canceled today. So she said, I'll just sit here and do the city training. She got it all knocked out. How long did it take you?
I don't know the exact hours, but I did it over a 2 day
Okay.
span where I had a good amount of time each day.
Yeah. So your goal is to go through the city training, and then after you do that, you upload your certificate of completion, and that city training then will kind of is good for it'll probably be good for your entire duration of being in the doctoral program. So when you go through anything that requires an IRB and they ask for your city training, you'll have to just upload that certificate for the IRB process.
Mhm.
City training is it's chucked full with really addressing how to think well when it comes to being a researcher and being ethical and being a researcher. I'm a big fan of Phil Zimbardo. I don't know if any of you have read any of Phil's work, or if you haven't read The Lucifer Effect, I think it's an outstanding book and should be on everybody's read list. And I take it you're all familiar that Phil was the head investigator, the PI in the Stanford prison experiment that went so south and sideways. And so in many years later, almost 30 years later, Phil went back and he revisited the Stanford prison experiment. He looked at all the tapes and he asked himself, how could I have not seen this coming? And he really tried to write explore this topic with perspective from all of his years afterwards, and that became what was known as the Lucifer effect. Um, a wonderful book, wonderful book, and I've had a chance of meeting Phil a couple of times before he's passed away just a few years ago. Was privileged to be on a small team that gave him a lifetime achievement award. Um, so Phil's work, a lot of it, he was kind of thinking about Stanley Milgram's work and those obedience experiments that were so popular. But afterwards, after the Stanford prison experiment and his own reflection, Phil really started to investigate and ask the question: Is it, we always say, is it a bad apple spoils the whole barrel, right? And Phil actually flips that question around and says, "Well, what if we put a good apple in a bad barrel? What happens?" And Phil says, "Good apples go bad in a bad barrel." And that was exactly what the problem was at the Stanford prison experiment. He created a scenario where it was a bad barrel. And even though you had these high quality, smart, intelligent college students, when you put them in a bad barrel, it didn't take long for them in that toxic environment to become um, bad apples. And so just a wonderful, again, research question. Um, So, drawing on your city training that you're going to do, you're going to also read an article. How many have you read the cautionary tale article? Has anybody gotten into that yet? Yeah, one of you has. A really interesting research article. I hope you read that and take some time to plumb the depths of that. Um, Sometimes I don't know that I've ever met anybody who got in ethical problems who just was a dirty, rotten scoundrel from the outset. It's easy to go down a slippery slope, and it's easy to justify that what you're doing is for the betterment of people. And I think the cautionary tale is a great example where the researchers had permission to do this study on on this Native Indian tribe, but they found some unexpected research findings, and they thought this would be helpful to publish, but they didn't go back to the tribe and ask for permission, and so they were really and the tribe really saw the results as being damaging and hurtful to the tribe and successfully sued. And so even in this, you had, I think, researchers who were well-meaning, but they just didn't do their due diligence. They didn't think about the ethical things that were challenged to think about all the time. So please read that article and percolate on that, if you will. So some of the Phil Zimbardo content as a backdrop challenges us to ask the question, how do we balance individual and community rights? What are the challenges in ensuring informed consent in real world research? How would counseling researchers address evolving ethics and concerns? Um, Being married to a pediatrician, I can tell you that whenever my wife, who is a scholar and a researcher, does research, we have these protective populations, and certainly children or minors are protected. And so getting research passed in that venue is so stringent. And yet I appreciate the stringent perspective that the hospitals often have. And it may seem as if they're needling and noodling and just slowing down your study, but that's their role. And I think it's always good to have somebody who is disengaged from the research and is just looking at things from a human subjects and protecting people perspective. And that's what the IRB is about. The IRB is not about stopping your study. It's about protecting humans. And so when they ask you for the fourth time to tell you what you think you've already told them, just tell them because they haven't heard what they need to hear to say that your study is passing mustard and not potentially doing something that is unethical or questionable. Shifting gears a little bit, this is one of my favorite slides. I keep this slide up around me a lot. Uh, so again, this is we're Concordian, so we're faith-based. So we like to think about how the Christian faith might interact with our discipline. This is a this is this is this is it's somewhat rudimentary and somewhat simple, but I think it's also drives the point. And so this I think this slide is trying to say that all revelation, all truth comes from God, and that it tends to split off into at least two directions. And so God has revealed Himself through Scripture, and when humans read and interpret Scripture, we call that theology. And that God also has revealed Himself to us in nature. I think it's beautiful that in the very beginning of the book of Genesis, Adam is tasked with naming the animals, and I believe that is a call. We have the first scientist. He's giving us our first taxonomy of animals. I don't in the book of Genesis early on, and so I think that's a call that's in all of us. And so when we explore nature, well, we've divided it into the sciences. And so whether it's biology or whether it's physics, whether it's medicine or whether it's the social sciences, when we're exploring God's creation, God's created order. I love that expression, God's created order. That's the sciences. And of course, I like to think that there's an interaction between my theology and science. And so I think that's even if you saw my factor analysis example and what I was trying to do in this book is I'm trying to show the connectivity between scripture and the natural ordered world around us and God's created this order. So I like to keep this in front of us and just kind of like play with it from time to time and help us think deeply about this. It's not the only way you can kind of square things up. And so if you have a Methodist background, you might be familiar with Wesley's quadrilateral. So Wesley would say that all truth is revealed to us through one of these four window panes, or all of these window panes, if it's word. God's truth is revealed to us in Scripture. It's revealed to us in experience. So we have our experiences which inform us. We have our reason, we have our ability to think, and then we have tradition. Now, if you would probably read Wesley careful, he would probably say if you had to err on making one box bigger than the other, he would probably say make the Scripture bigger. But it's true that we probably even see churches organize kind of at a global level around this. And so this is somebody's slide. I don't know whether it's 100% accurate, but it does kind of like you do see, like maybe we could think about like the charismatic churches tend to be a little bit better at thinking about experience and the experiential part of our Christianity. Um, I've been in evangelical churches where they're very good at expositing God's word, but it doesn't seem like it really touches on like, well, what's that mean for me in my family that's this splitting apart right now, right? Um, the Catholic, I would even say Lutherans, we're really pretty good at tradition, and that's important. That orders our Christian experience. I love the confessional part, the regular confessional part of my church service. And then some churches are very heady and reason oriented. So just kind of a fun slide. Don't make too much out of it, but it's just kind of again just to help you to think about how to bring your faith alongside of this research process that we're engaging in. For me, you'll see often my faith come into my counseling and into my teaching in two primary ways. Sometimes I'll simply just make room for God. I'll just invite God into our presence and by asking us if we want to pray. Just making room for God to be in our midst. And then other times there's specific application of truth, like the factor analysis exercise that I took you through tonight. To that point, Um, where are my books? Where you've been, we are going to read Eat This Book. How many of you have read anything by Eugene Peterson other than The Message? No? Oh, this you are if Eugene Peterson's The Message is like okay. His other writings are fantastic. So if you've never read Eat This Book, you're in for a treat. So this is um, a very different side of our brain that we will use when we use this. So please stay up on this reading and read in this because I want to, from time to time, make sure we're discussing it. And again, this is just simply making room for God. I don't really have any expectations other than if we're engaging and thinking with a level of seriousness about God and His Word and how it interacts with us, um, things will happen. uh, I remember my dad, who was a pastor once, was my dad, when he was asked by a newspaper reporter, like if the things my dad said were miracles were really just uh, they just happened randomly, or they were just like, how did they, how did the newspaper reporter was kind of pressing my dad, like, how did he know that prayer and miracles really work? And my dad, I remember my dad saying, well, here's what I know. When I pray, things happen. And when I don't pray, things don't happen. So read this, and we're going to anticipate that things will happen as far as like having an opportunity to explore faith. All right. So now, I know you guys are all Napoleon Dynamite fans. If you aren't, you really should just like, what are we doing in this course? What are we doing in this course? That's what you really came here to find out about tonight. Okay, so as already have said, we are going to be evaluating EMDR for trauma and the effectiveness using causal science. And we're going to the central question that I at least have right now, just kind of a general question is, does EMDR cause meaningful improvement in trauma outcomes? And we could argue about that question, and that's fine. I do want to pick that question apart and rebuild it as especially as we get into the literature. This course functions as a collaborative research team. Also joining us will be Dr. Caitlin Stafford, who is probably our heaviest hitter on our faculty in trauma. And so as a content expert, I want her involved in this process. And her and I we work wonderfully together. And we're actually a little bit on opposite ends already of the EMDR thing. She's probably a big believer in it, and I'm a skeptic in it. So you already have I'm not saying EMDR doesn't have effectiveness. I'm just not sure that what everybody thinks is the mechanism. Um, so you can watch us play out our pathology in front of you. This course functions as a collaborative research, as I said. This is not an exercise. This is real research. So I am going into this with you, anticipating that we will have conference presentations and scholarly publications out of this. Um, And the big picture is in weeks 1 through 7, we're going to be heavily into doing a literature review and constructing and developing and operationalizing our question and our variables. We will write a methods section, which is what the methods section follows a lit review, and it tells the reader what our scientific process will be for for reviewing all of the articles and coming up with what's robust and what isn't about EMDR in treating individuals with trauma. And then as I indicated, two primary methodologies we'll be learning are the Bradford Hill causal analysis and modern causal inference modeling. And the reason we're using two is because it kind of they work well together, and so they together they offer a more whole scope in analyzing all the papers that we'll be looking at. So that'll be basically in weeks 1 through 7. Weeks 8 through 14 is where we then write up our results of this research. So we've done the literature review, we've done the methods in the first 7 weeks. In the second 7 weeks, we write up our results and we write up a discussion. So by the time we get to the end of this course in the second section, you have a full working draft of a paper that's not quite ready probably yet for submission to a journal, but it's well on its way. Uh, and you've had a chance to go through the full research cycle with me. This is just a slide looking at the Bradford Hill major dimensions. It asks about every research paper that we're going to look at, what are its strengths, its consistency, its specificity, temporality, biological gradients, plausibility, etc. And then modern causal inferences looks at counterfactual reasoning, confounding and bias control. You know what I'm going to do? How many of you have heard of Peter Attia? Anybody heard of a Peter Attia? Oh, Michelle knows who Peter Attia is. He's really into preventative medicine. And Peter Attia has a great podcast on autism where he takes the person that he's sitting with, he takes them through the Bradford Hill dimensions. And so you can hear how because the question, so remember what happened in this administration. So remember, part of what the Trump team, what they ran on is, there's all this increase in autism. And so part of their platform, or one of their planks, was we're going to fix and find out what the cause of autism was, right? So then they had to deliver. That was what they said they had to do. So a few months ago, what was the study what came out for, on autism, was the cause of autism? Do you remember? You have to turn on your mics. I can't read lips that well.
Tylenol.
Tylenol, exactly. So Peter Attia pulls all of the research articles on Tylenol and autism, and he talks you through the Bradford Hill dimensions. So I'm going to give you the podcast of that, and I think if you, it's I'll make it available. And I think if you listen to the podcast, you'll get a good idea of, like, oh, at least one phase of this study, and you'll I think probably feel like, oh, we can do this. So. We can do it. We can do it. My own is in problem-based learning. I don't know if any of you are familiar with problem-based learning. It's a style of teaching. And so my wife actually did her medical school at Ohio State in a problem-based learning environment, and my doctorate was all in a private problem-based learning. And so we had these, and I won't go into all of the nuances of problem-based learning, but we had 3 questions that were always driving every class. And that is, what do I know? What don't I know? And how am I going to go get and learn what I don't know? And so you're going to hear me say this a few times this 7 weeks, and probably the next 7 weeks. I'm going to say, well, what do we know about EMDR? What do we know about trauma? What do we know? We want to focus on adolescence, maybe. Like, well, what do we know about EMD, other treatments that are effective in treating trauma in adolescence? And what don't we know, and how are we going to go get it? And so, we need more literature. Is there more literature out there? Okay, there's not. That'll be part of what we say. There's not a lot of literature in this area. And so this iterative process between what do I know, what don't I know, and how am I going to go get it? And we might substitute the word I, we might put in there we, because we're going to be functioning as a team. So what do we know? What don't we know? And how are we going to go get this? And this is how real researchers solve problems. So your responsibilities will be to locate and evaluate professional literature, and you're going to be busy on that. Real quick here, you're going to be identifying valid constructs and outcome measures. You're going to be hoping to classify the evidence using the causal dimensions, and you're going to be contributing to the manuscript and writing the literature review, the methods, the results of those discussion. And and then Dr. Stafford and I will be giving you feedback on those and helping you do rewrites, and even at points we'll be doing, especially in the results and discussion, we'll be even helping you do some of those write-ups as well. So you're not just, again, learning your research, you're actually doing it. So we're throwing you in the deep end of the pool. and teaching you to swim. So what's success look like? And this is my last slide, I think. By the end of this course, you should be able to defend causal claims with confidence, distinguish strong versus weak evidence. You should be able to translate your findings into clinical meaning. And I think I heard that as a theme. Like when I think about research, how do I connect that to clinic? And design strong future studies. So this will help you think about your own studies that you might do, especially as for a dissertation. And of course, this is doctoral level scholarship. And that is my slide deck for tonight. So I'm sorry I blasted all that at you so fast. So let's just take a deep breath and tell me what sense you're making out of all that.
I'm not making any sense of it yet, but I'm really excited to start making sense of it.
Probably a really good answer. Yeah.
I'm curious, is anybody trained in EMDR? I know Dr. Stafford is. Okay, Michelle, you are. All right.
I am too.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So we have some in-house experts here. And yeah.
Okay.
And you have a curmudgeon who doesn't think it does anything. No, that's not true. That's not, not I play that devil's advocate but I do question the method. I do question what the mechanism is, but I do know that there is an efficaciousness to it for sure, 100%. I just I'm not, so we'll get into that. That'll be part of what we look at, right? So like well, we're gonna I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised by the end of this myself. Um, so and to be able to really make a contribution and say, if we take all of the seminal work that's out there, what do we know? What don't we know? What do we need to do to fill in those gaps? I mean, that's the problem-based learning really will come back and be kind of like our frame for our writing too. What do we know when we use these two approaches to look at all the literature, and what don't we know, and here are the gaps or what needs to happen in future research. And by the way, I'm going to be doing this twice. So while I'm doing this with you, with Paul, Cami Delgado and I are doing it the same. We're doing the same methodology process with psychedelics in treating PTSD in the military population. So kind of, I think a cousin kind of approach. So and we're excited about doing this together. So I think this is fun. I think it's going to be really exciting. I'm looking forward to this project. And I don't usually finish up this early, so we got a half an hour to just like talk about whatever.
With our research, and you mentioned different populations. Will we be looking at it just across the board, or will we be separating it out, like looking at children, adolescents, adults?
Yeah, that's a kind of a what do we know, don't we
Okay.
know kind of question,
Yep.
right? So like what do we even know about like the body of literature that's out there that's robust, right? So that would be kind of one of your first steps is just to identify what's the robust body of literature, as far as like on a variety of things, Michelle. So like the population, right? And even if we get a population, like let's just say adolescents, like, do we have to quantify like the level of trauma they've experienced or the kinds of trauma they've experienced? Are we going to just focus on kind of a narrow band of trauma? Or are we going to be catcher all on that? Then we have to even like look at like the quality of the EMDR. Not everybody does EMDR the same way. I mean, right? So we've got that's part of like what do we know, what don't we know, and how are we going to go get it? We have to and that's what I mean when I say we have to operationalize a lot. We have to be very concrete and specific. In the hard sciences, it's a lot easier to think about this. So if we're going to decide whether hot water boils faster than cold water, it's a lot more controlled. We can use the same beakers, we can use the same flame to heat the water. We can do all this stuff, but and we can control all the variables. But in the human sciences, like trying to quantify what it is we're actually measuring and is really tricky. And if we just want to take a big basket perspective and throw all the articles in there, it it's going to be kind of mud, right? So we have to. So these are some of the questions that we have to spin off, and we're going to have to make some choice points. And I'm going to really count on you and Dr. Stafford's knowledge about the literature as we get into it to say, here's what we're finding, here's what we don't know, even when we look at the literature. Here's seems like I would assume that we would probably want to pick a population that has the most research on it, to be honest. So
Yeah.
adolescents might be hard again because you're looking at IRB challenges and published research. I think they're more slippery because you're still talking about human development
Right.
issues. And so a 14-year-old looks very different than an 18-year-old. So maybe we want to look at adults. Do we want to look at females only? Do we want to look at males only? I mean, all these kind of like who presents for treatment more often than I would assume. I would assume it's. I don't know. I'm not even going to say that. My bias is to say maybe women show up for more, but I don't know if that's true or not. Certainly not in the military. I mean, I do a lot of work in the military, and it's all dudes. But
Yeah, I'm curious of the decision-making points because that's what I was thinking when you first said it. My mind goes to any of the research that I've looked at, right? It starts to feel like a fire hose because there's a lot of different research, but then children versus adults. And then there's a lot of research on like sexual trauma with females with EMDR, not a lot in eating disorders with EMDR. And then you're looking at it, are they certified in IMDRIA or are we doing both? Are we doing one or the other?
and
Uh,
we may have enough room in a study to like look at more than one.
yeah.
But we have to kind of like say, okay, we're going to apply the Bradford Hill first to this body of papers and then this group of papers and maybe even look, however we decide the choice points are will be us, like maybe the level of training of the people of the experts, right? Or maybe by population. So we have some cut points that'll be challenging that we'll have to think through.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah, and this is part of like learning to do research. I mean, you can make any research die the death of 1,000 qualifications. I can destroy anybody's research if I just keep, like, well, did you control for this? Did you control for that? No, you can't control for everything, right? It's just impossible. So you don't want to go down the road of just like destroying everything because it's impossible to quantify it. But yet we do have to try to put things in a box as best we can too. The thing is, we don't have to do that. All we have to do is look at the papers. Like we're not making a new research project up. We're just reporting on what's already out there. I mean, I would assume that we're going to have some interesting gaps to report. And how exciting would that be to be able to go to a conference and say, here's what based on all, like say the last 20 years of research, here's what we can say really positively about EMDR, and here's where we can say, it starts to get a little hinky, and here's where we say, here's where we need a lot more research. I mean, that's a great contribution. How do you guys feel in general about this topic? Kaylee's excited for it. We know that.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I'm excited for it.
I'm excited for it too. I'm not EMDR trained, but I did it as a client for like a long time and felt that it was really transformative for me. But I'm also like a devil's advocate and I like to find out that I'm wrong. So I'll be curious to see what I learned about it too.
I clearly have the least amount of experience with it because I've only seen it done. I saw it done a couple of times during my master's internship, but other than that, I know virtually nothing about EMDR. So I was debating if I ask this in class and admit my stupidity, calling out my own crap. Does anybody have any particular articles or like baseline research or something that would be helpful to look at? Like if you know basically nothing about it? Because I feel like you all have a leg up on this, and I'm just sitting here going, "Oh, well, that'll be interesting."
No, see, Christine, I think this is why I like the team research because you have a valuable perspective. You know, we all have different levels of interaction with this, and this makes us well-rounded. So you're going to go like, I don't understand that at all. Explain that to me, you know, and so you're going to be able to kind of play that voice of like, break that for me down again, to make that down again for me. So I see that as a power strength for you in this for sure. Uh, just to have us all at different levels and spaces and mindsets.
Mhm. Mhm.
So but you do bring up something right away, and that is one of the tasks you'll have to do, and you even see it in the course this week. I have like that team building thing, that little team. Is there a sheet? I think I have that. Have you guys done this yet? Let me go to my course. So, um, might be week 2. Okay, week 2. You can jump ahead and work on it if you want. I have what I call a team member accountability audit. So this is where you guys need to fill this out and be, you know, what's the best way to communicate with each other? You know, what's the best times? You know, maybe you like phone calls. You know, Dr. Palo, he just loves phone calls. Like everybody goes, was like, let's jump on Zoom. And then whenever I say let's jump on Zoom with Dr. Palo, he goes, no, I'll just call you. And he just calls, you know, so he just likes to call you. Like so like what's your style of communication? You know, when are your good times? And the other thing is, you know, how will you need a little bit of transparency? How will your teammates know when you're not pulling your load? So like, what do you do? What do you do when when you're not pulling the load? Maybe you're overwhelmed with things in your personal life. Do you just ghost everybody, or do you say, "Oh, I'll get to it tomorrow," but then you don't get to it tomorrow, right? And so, what's your style? What's your when you're not in the game? How will everybody know it? And so I'm encouraging you in kind of the team member accountability audit to be able to have some transparency on how you communicate in your style and when how can the other teammates know when you're stressed out and maybe not engaged or something's going on and how to pull you back in. Because this takes all of us rowing together to do this. This is not a one person. You can't do this on your own. You will flounder. And 4 is a fantastic number. It's perfect. But all of a sudden, if one of you that is doing something that for the team, that's a 25% drop in horsepower. So I encourage you to and related to that, you probably want to start maybe thinking about how you're going to organize yourselves. Maybe somebody's setting up a shared Google Drive that you're going to start throwing articles into. Like so, Christine's already asking for like some kind of 101 primer to get her kind of up to speed. So I'm sure that there's stuff out there. And so just starting to build resources and a library and way to and subfolders to organize your papers and so forth. So, and one of you is probably that person that really is good at that. And so, you know, again, you rely on your strengths and kind of lean into that. And in week 2, we're going to get into week 2, you're really going to get into starting to look at get into the literature. So we get through this ethics stuff and we start getting into finding articles and reading them. And book chapters can be book chapters and stuff as well. I'm always available. Well, not always. I'm available. uh, I'm around. So, like, if you're working on this stuff as a team, you're working on it individually. You're stuck on the I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know how to go get it. You know, please don't like rely on each other and try to puzzle through it, but also know that like if you're not texting me or emailing me or something reaching out to me, I can't help you. And so Again, Dr. Stafford and I want to be a part of this with you. So this is a collaborative journey, and we're your instructors, and we're over you, but we're also collaborating with you.
Is it okay to shift to asking some questions about the class in general and the assignments?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So because I just want to make sure, Christine, I'm jumping in with you, girl. So for example, each professor has done the class time participation points a little bit differently. So I went on for our class time, and what I'm seeing and want to make sure is correct is that our participation equates to you assigning points, that we only submit something if we miss the class and need to do a 1 to 2 page paper. I just
Uh,
wanted, is that correct?
Correct. That's correct. Yeah. So
Okay, so you don't need to submit anything after class for this to count.
no, but it is helpful if you go to that assignment link and you just say I attended.
Oh,
Um,
I think we would need to submit a like a Word document that says I attended.
oh, you can't
Or
just
we can add a comment.
you can
Is
just add
that
a comment. If you add a comment,
great? Okay.
yeah, because in the Canvas, it triggers it for me to grade it, and I have to go look for the virtual classes. It's always hard to look for them. I don't know why. It's just like it's not the most counterintuitive. It's probably not a problem for the four of you, but when I teach a class of 16
Yeah,
students,
that makes sense.
so
Okay, perfect.
yeah,
Thank you.
you
That's
only have
super
to
helpful.
submit something if you've missed a class.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. And then for our assignment this week on the discussion board.
Yep. So there's usually three assignments every week. So one of
Okay.
your assignments tonight is, of course, attending the virtual class, which you've done. Then you have the completing of the city certification, and
Mhm.
then the other one in between is the discussion board, which is really let me make sure I did this.
This one's a PowerPoint.
Okay. Yes, is it a PowerPoint? It's an article.
It says create it. Well, it tells us to create a PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha. Is this I'm just looking to make sure this is yes. Oh, it's a different format, this article. Okay. Um, has anybody done this assignment yet?
mm-mm.
All right. Hmm. I like the
Are we
noodle.
creating the PowerPoint and answering those questions? So it's like a two-part thing?
Dr. Newmeyer's thinking
Uh-oh.
I am
sure
thinking.
something.
I see wheels turning.
Yeah,
Yep.
I am thinking, aren't I? So I'm always looking to bring how to like bring AI into the conversation.
Okay.
So I have oh, what's it called? Oh, how many of you have you used the Google um, how many of you use Notebook LM by Google? All right, this will be funner. Um, nobody start the discussion board until I give you directions tomorrow. This is gonna be a lot funner. So
Okay.
I'm gonna here's what I'm gonna do. You're going to have the article and you're going to read it,
Okay.
and then you're going to listen to a podcast discussing the article. The podcast is generated by Notebook LM. It's two people, and they're going to have you can literally throw the article or PDF into this Notebook LM, and it'll turn it into a podcast.
Wow.
So I'm going to have you read the article, listen to a podcast on the article, and then I'm going to ask you to critique how well you think the podcast did at capturing the essence of the article. And in that way, you're getting an opportunity to see I think answer an interesting question is how effective is Notebook LM at capturing content because people are using Notebook LM all over the place to make podcasts.
Super cool.
I played around with it over my sabbatical. I like to break things. That's how I figure out how they work. So like I threw my tax forms into it. I threw like 3 weeks of should say through 3 weeks of my sister's Facebook posts into it because she posts every day.
That's great.
Yeah, we were all. I was on the floor laughing. Um, but here's why I'm bringing up Notebook LM. Notebook LM has exploded in its complexity. When
Mhm.
we're in this class, let's just say we come up with 30 seminal articles on EMDR, and we say these are the 30 articles that are going to be the backbone of the research we're going to do. We can throw all 30 articles into Notebook LM and it'll podcast it. And when you're listening to it, you can literally now, it's so sophisticated, you can stop and you can ask the podcasters a question and they'll answer your question based upon, so you can say, hey, I remember one article talking about using this particular analysis. Can you see more about that analysis and how it works and how the researchers used it to get to the answers on EMDR? And it'll just like do it.
Fascinating.
So I would like to introduce Notebook LM as part of like a ongoing learning. Like I just so I'm gonna tomorrow I'm gonna rewrite this real tonight, and tomorrow I'll send it back out to you with a little bit doctored up. And the assignment again will be just real simple. Read the article, which isn't that long. Listen to the podcast, which will probably be about 15 minutes, and then I want you to critique how well the podcast did at capturing the the essence of the article. Did you
So we can write the critique instead of doing a PowerPoint, correct?
100%. 100%.
All right.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Fascinating.
like you a lot more now, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. I'll sleep better tonight knowing that.
I know, I know.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And this will get you exposure to Notebook LM too.
Yeah.
And you can. The other thing I'm using is HeyGen. Have any of you heard of HeyGen? HeyJGen.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, see if I can find this real quick for you. This will blow your mind if I can find it real quick.
Is this the video generator? I think you told us about it in back in the
Yes.
summer that was making like the short clips.
Yes. So, um, see if I can I found them. I'll find the right one. Oh, wonder if I can how I can share wonder if I can share this. How do you play this? I'm gonna try this. We're gonna try this. You may not be able to hear it. That's my concern. Can you see the HeyGen? Okay, we're gonna try to play it and see what happens. Oh, that didn't work. Maybe it did. Give it a second here to see if it comes up. Oh.
Hola, bienvenidos de nuevo a nuestro recorrido devocional a través de las estadísticas. En el capítulo 2 analizamos la desviación estándar, una forma sencilla pero poderosa de entender qué tan dispersos están nuestros datos. Algunos grupos se agrupan estrechamente alrededor del promedio, mientras que otros se extienden a lo largo del rango. Y al igual que esa idea estadística, nuestras vidas, nuestras historias y nuestras comunidades.
So that's obviously a computer generated me. That's not me. That's my avatar. And that's my avatar speaking, doing a 90-second introduction to each. I've made these I made these in English. So I created an avatar and then I gave it a script. All I did was give it a script. And then in my voice and with me and even my mannerisms, it does about a 90-second introduction to each one of my chapters. But then all I had to do is just tell it to reproduce all of those videos in Spanish, or I can do it in Mandarin, or I can do it with an Australian accent, do whatever. So yeah, it's a crazy world we live in. Pretty soon you won't even know if I'm really doing class tonight.
The Spanish isn't great.
Say it again.
The Spanish isn't great. Like, I was a Spanish major during my undergrad, so
Yeah.
I know something. But it was also 20 years ago, so we've got to take that into consideration as well, you know. But like some of it really I could understand, and some of it was very muffled that unless you were a native speaker, and I'm sure a native speaker would be like,
Yeah,
what
it
the
was hard. I don't think my speaker was so you could hear it. I think if I would have given you the video, it would be a lot clearer.
okay,
Yeah,
okay, yeah, huh.
yeah. Well, we are close now to the bottom of the hour. So I think your tasks are, for at least this week, is to do the city training. It's to wait for me on the other one, on the cautionary tale. It's to probably start to think about organizing yourselves as far as like maybe some shared drives. I would suggest maybe a Google Drive because that seems to be probably be the easiest. And if you want to add Dr. Stafford to those drives, some of those drives for the articles and stuff, and we can be dumping things and content in it, it'd probably be helpful for us too. And we're off. And do your reading. I mean, don't get behind on your reading. So really stay up on your reading. And oh, one last thing on the reading. So now this mine's older. I don't know where my ninth or 10th edition is. I just have well, I do. It's electronic. But the Pirzak and Bruce writing empirical research reports. This is it's a very practical how-to book. And I don't spend a lot of time talking about it, but what I will say is it's always evident to me the students who actually spend time in this book because it's really super practical. Like, so when you're writing an abstract, it'll say, here are the nuts and bolts of how to write an abstract. Here's what goes into it. Here's what doesn't go into it. When you're writing the beginning of a lit review, here's some things that you want to think about and how to structure and write it. Here's some other things you probably, here's some rabbit trails you want to avoid. And so it's a very, very practical, hands-on book. And so make sure you're spending time with this little guy. Again, mine's an older edition. This is the eighth. I think my other ones are electronic, so I can't show it to you. But the Pirzak and Bruce book it's a practical how-to book for sure. Okay, how you feeling?
Can I ask one more dumb question?
Yeah, sure. I like dumb questions.
Thanks. Next week we are not meeting with you. We're meeting with Dr. Washburn. Is that correct?
I think next week you have, is that one of those little 1 credit hour
Yeah.
classes? Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
yeah, yeah.
Just wanted to make sure. All right.
Yeah,
Carry on.
we're 1, 3, 5, and 7. So I do have us down for 7 in this class because I think we need to wrap up. So, but I'm available other times. Please reach out to me. This is fun, and I'm sure we're going to be in contact frequently on this stuff. So I'll hang out. I'll hang out for a little bit if you